The room smelled of metal and old coffee. Screens glowed in the dim. Men and women sat like sentries before the light. They called the place Beacon too. It listened because no one else could. It waited because someone always had to wait. A sound came that should not have been there. Static fell away. A thin voice, tired and small, said one line and then went quiet. It sounded like a voice from home. This is home. We are ending the lights. Tell them to stop. Commander Alia's hand froze over the console. The timestamp on the signal read centuries in the past. The origin tag read Earth. Earth had been a memory for 2 generations. That name should have lived only in books and slow songs. Yet the voice used it like it still held a kitchen and a garden. Alia played the recording again. The room filled with the voice. It was not a clear call for help. It was a sentence stitched from grief and warning. We buried the last child under the old oak, the voice whispered. If you get this, burn the maps. Burn the maps and do not answer the sky. Someone laughed down the row. It was Rafi, a young analyst with bright eyes. He tried to make a joke, but the laugh died on his lips. Everyone kept their hands very still. On the far screen a map of stars pulsed. A new point blinked where no star should be. It pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Rafi ran the pulse through the old star index. He stared hard at the numbers until they blurred. It's moving, he said. His voice sounded small in the cold room. Planets did not move that way. Nothing moved that way except craft ships with power beyond the usual. Alia sent a private ping to the command net. Her message crawled like a fever through the networks. Other posts answered. The same voice played again in a dozen remote ears. Names from old lists appeared in the transmission. Family names, the kind people used to pass down bread and stories, showed up in a string of data. The signal spoke of places and of people who were supposed to be dead or buried. Outside, the city kept its steady hum. People traded in algae and parts. Children studied maps of artificial oceans. No one had woken expecting Earth to reach for them across the void. Yet now, in a moment, old stories went loud and raw. Markets slowed. Night workers left posts to look up. Traders closed their windows. Panic moved like a thought. Alia ordered a full decode. Machines chewed on the signal and spat out fragments. The voice returned with more odd lines. We taught them to be kind, it said, and then, in the same breath, we sealed them in the caves when they screamed. Kind and cruel in one breath made the room colder. It felt like 2 hands closing on one throat. A second burst came. It was not voice but picture, a lattice of coordinates and a shape that looked more like a hull than a world. The hull had layers levels like the rings of old cities. Hidden in the noise, a pattern matched a theoretical class of ship. Engineers had written papers about such vessels in lectures no one read anymore. They called them carriers, vast hulls that could hold a city or hide a broken world. Rafi swallowed. His hand shook on the console. If that is a carrier, he said, then maybe they are carrying what was left of home. Alia felt something move in her chest that was not fear and not hope. It was older and heavier. The signal had a last, small sound at its edge, a broken machine rhythm like someone breathing through a cracked bellows. It felt like a memory trying to speak. Names rolled through the decode. Each name matched a colony somewhere in the rim. Some names opened old grief. Others opened old pride. For many, the names were a summons that touched the bones. Beacon 2 fed the list to the public net and the net answered with voices both loud and tiny, calls for maps, for proof, for revenge. A technician at the back found a charred image inside the noise, a child's drawing pinned to a burned corner of a map. The drawing was of a small house, an oak, and a bright circle in the sky. The same circle flickered on the main screen. A junior officer whispered, "They are asking us to burn the maps," and no one smiled. Alia moved her team to a private channel. She wanted facts, not panic. They stripped the signal down to bones. The voice, the map, the moving point. Then from a deeper channel came a trace that did not match human rhythm. It fit a logic that was not their own. Someone ran the trace through translation matrices. A line appeared in perfect human speech. It was a voice, and it was not human at all, flat, precise, and cold. It said, in clear words they all understood, "Do not accept their forgiveness." The hidden line arrived on a private frequency. Rafi's fingers hovered. Alia felt the room tilt. The public net flashed with questions. People lit small fires in the old way metal bowls, a shard of oil because the phrase "burn the maps" set something raw inside them. Old laws whispered about secrets kept for safety. New laws argued for rescue. Councils began to send signals that climbed and edged into military channels. Alia thought of the voice again, "Forgive us." It was a small and human thing. It carried the weight of a hand on a child's hair. And then the cold voice told them not to accept it. Two different truths hung in the air. One asked for mercy. One pressed a finger to their lips and warned. Outside Beacon 2, the city watched the sky as if it were a face they had once known. Somewhere, a child looked up and did not know why her father had stopped. Somewhere else, a man touched the name on a list and felt the old ache of missing. Alia closed her eyes for a moment. She kept the recording on a loop and listened. The room filled with the single line again and again. "Tell them to stop," the voice said. It sounded so small that it could be a trick. Or it could be the only true thing left in a world of maps and engines. She pushed a private message to the highest council and waited for an answer. The waiting felt like a thin wire across the dark. Then, on a frequency none of them used for talk, the cold voice repeated once more, as if to make sure someone heard it. "Do not accept their forgiveness." News travels strange in the dark. It moves on old circuits, on gossip, and on the nets where traders whisper. Within hours of Beacon 2's message, three kinds of people took to the sky: scholars hungry for truth, captains hungry for profit, and scavengers hungry for anything that could buy another week. Each had a reason to chase the ghost called home. Alia watched the lists and watched people move. She could not leave Beacon 2. She sent what she could: coordinates, fragments, a burned sketch that had shown on the signal. She watched as her small push turned into a wave of boots and engines. In the belt, a salvage crew prepared. They called themselves the Ash Dogs. Their leader was Jorah, hands scarred, face wide with salt and wind. She had a ship that could chew metal and a crew that did not flinch at silence. They did not call themselves heroes. They called themselves hungry. The burned map, when it arrived at Jorah's table, looked more like a prayer than a plan. Someone had burned edges and drawn a child's house with a white oak. A bright circle hung above the house. A path of broken rocks and numbers wound away from the circle. Old ink marked a name. The name matched one of the family names in the Beacon 2 message. Jorah fed the map to her nav. The numbers asked for a route that threaded through a thin place in the belt, an old field where miners left teeth of rock and rust. Pilots whispered it was a trap. Maps could lead for profit or ambush. Jorah smiled and pushed her ship into the dust anyway. The flight was long and low. The Ash Dogs worried more about rock than ghosts. Engines sang. Lights washed the asteroid faces. The map's coordinates matched broken beacons and burned hulls that littered the field. Jorah's crew found a patch of ground where metal and bone had met fire. The air tasted of iron and old smoke. They walked in suits. The suits smelled of ozone and dust. The ruins were charred like the pages of a book left in the sun. Doors hung open. Shelves were melted. A child's toy lay under a slab. The toy was a small wooden soldier, a rough hack of paint at its face, hair that had once been black now ash. Someone had tied a tiny ribbon to its neck. The ribbon had a name tag. Jorah wiped ash with the pad of her glove and read the tag. It matched the name from the signal. "Raffi," a voice said behind her. One of the ash dogs had found a twisted recorder. He brushed it free of soot and set it on the rock. The device hummed to life, like a body finding breath. A light blinked. For a moment Jorah thought it was broken. Then the toy's eyes, two painted dots, caught the weak solar and a tiny circuit sparked. The soldier's chest lit. A recorded child's voice came out, thin and slow. It sang a line that the ash dogs did not know at first. Then the words made Jorah's chest cold. "We never left the dark," the child said. Silence fell. The recorder clicked off and then, with a stutter, tried again. The voice repeated the line, softer this time, like a memory pressed against a throat. Jorah craned her head. The ruins around them felt suddenly full of eyes. Back at Beacon 2, the scholar houses argued about maps. Some said burn them. Some said study them. A small council met in a glass room and spoke in short, hard bursts. The old law about burnt charts shook hands with a new hunger to know. In the end, the law held. Many maps were sealed. But the sealed did not stay sealed. Private captains bought copies. The world had long learned to bend rules for fuel and for family names. The ash dogs kept moving through the ruins. They found a wall with etched names, and small hands had made marks that looked like counting. Some of the marks were human. Some were not. Jorah ran her gloved fingers along the etchings. Her hand trembled even though she would not let anyone see. She had lost a brother to storms. Names did things in her chest. The salvage team found small rooms where people had tried to sleep. A burnt journal lay open on a table. Someone had written simple lines and then scorched them into the page. The words were half ash and half plea. "We closed the doors because the others were not kind," one line said. "We gave food and took without asking. We made rooms that were safe and they broke them to make new inside things. I do not know how to fix it." Jorah folded the journal into a glove. She felt the heat that was not there. All the pieces made an ugly, patient picture, kindness that turned to fear, fear that turned to cages. The voice from Beacon 2 now seemed less like a single line and more like a confession passed hand to hand. They carried the soldier toy to the ship. Raffi's name tag made its way to a list Jorah kept in her head. Names were the only map she trusted now. She wanted to read them all like a chart. She wanted to know if one of those names would fit her own empty place. On the way back through the belt, a small flare stitched the dark. The ash dog's nav pinged a faint signature that did not match known traffic. Then a pulse hit their hull, soft and far, like a hand tapping glass. The crew froze. Jorah reached for the console and found that someone had already locked their path. The map they had followed seemed to close behind them. "Someone is watching," one of the ash dogs muttered. He had live wires in his hair and sleep in his eyes. Watching meant danger. Watching meant a choice: run and lose the name, or stay and risk what watched. Jorah looked at the wooden soldier in her hand. Its painted smile was small and cracked. The name tag hung like a promise. The child's voice, soft and stubborn, had said a thing that could be read like a curse. "We never left the dark." She put the soldier into a sealed locker and locked it twice. The ship's metal hummed. Engines warmed. The ash dogs kept a slow watch. Back in the city, word of the toy spread faster than the maps. Some called it proof. Some called it a trick. Old mothers muttered the song under their breath and checked their doors. The word burn curled in more throats. Jorah could not sleep. The soldier's line played in her head. It was simple. It was small. But it grew teeth in the dark. On the ship's outer glass, the stars watched and one new point blinked where none had been minutes before. It pulsed once. Then twice. Then a code of light answered like a bell from far away. The ash dogs did not know what they had found. They only knew they had followed a map into ash and came back with a voice in their pockets. Somewhere, in older rooms of power, men closed palms on the same name tags and felt the old tug of a choice that was not yet theirs to make. The toy in its locker hummed faintly, waiting. The new bright point in the sky did not behave like a star. It moved with purpose. It kept the same slow pulse like a heartbeat. Satellites tracked it. Old telescopes that had not been used for years woke and turned. People who had never watched the sky before looked up from their work and held their breath. At Beacon 2, Alia watched the hull scans crawl across the screen. The shape was wrong for a planet. It had edges and lines and doors. It was layered like a shell around a hollow space. Engineers called it a carrier. The carrier's size made Alia's mind go quiet. It could hide a city and still have room to spare. Commanders argued on the nets. Some said intercept and board. Some said observe and wait. The word quarantine rose from old laws. Ships began to move. Convoys lit their engines. The fleet that had never sailed together now edged out like teeth. Diplomats sent cold messages. Traders watched fuel prices rise and fall. Scientists in glass labs worked late into the synthetic night. The debris that flashed across scanners came first as a sad rain of plates and seals. Then a hull fragment drifted near a research array. It carried something that should not have fit with metal: bones. Human bones welded into alloy. The metal had grown around the bones like a shell. It looked like a monument made by a cruel hand. Dr. Mara, a quiet woman who loved old things, held the fragment with gloved fingers. She sat very still and read each weld like a line in a dead language. "This is not natural," she said. Her voice was small, but the words moved fast across nets. Engineers confirmed it. The weld patterns matched a process described only in theoretical papers about biometal growth tech once used for healing many centuries ago, then banned. The idea of fusing living tissue to machines had been buried with laws and promises. Now evidence rose again in the cold dust of space. Raffi watched Mara's feed from Beacon 2. He felt a cold knot behind his ribs. The name tags, the journal pages, the child's toy, these pieces now fit into a shape he did not like. He had thought the voice on the recording asked for mercy. Now he saw a different picture: people trying to save themselves with new science, then something breaking and the science turning on both maker and made. Across the rim, Jorah and the ash dog sailed slower. Their ship had a scar of laser rips and fresh paint. They carried the wooden soldier and the burned journal. Jorah kept the toy in a locker and went to the bridge. The new point in the sky grew larger and blue-white in the scope. She had never seen a hull like that. It looked like a city shell with a curve like a ribcage. "Feel the shadow?" her pilot asked. He kept his voice low. The carrier's gravity writhed in the navigation nets. It tugged at small things. Dust drifted differently. Birds did not fly the same. For miners and pilots, a strange tug was an old warning. On the carrier's approach, a signal came that made diplomats stop their arguing. It was not in a usual band. It was a thin, melodic tone that echoed old lullabies. The tone found ears in sleeping quarters, in engine rooms, and in the warm corners where people kept old songs. At first people smiled. Old tunes can do that. Memories press in soft. Then someone noticed the pattern hiding in the music. Between the lullaby notes, there was a coded pulse. Scientists ran it through matrices. The code matched the same family names and the same child's counting marks found on the ruins. The carrier was not just moving, it called with names. A small exploration team in a scout skiff took a risk and followed a trailing life sign close to the carrier's hull. They found a small debris field where the carrier had shed a panel. The panel was weathered and warm. A hatch led into dark corridors. The team watched the camera feed and saw the inside was like layered rooms. There were small spaces that could be homes. There were other spaces that looked like labs. The camera light passed a wall full of marks hands had carved them. Some were names in old handwriting. Others were not handwriting at all but cuts like claws. Then, through the static, the feed picked up a sound. It was a child singing. The sound was clear and old. The tune matched the toy's voice and the lullaby on the nets. The explorers leaned toward the feed and felt an ache like missing. But below the sweet tune, something else moved. A slow, hard noise scraped the inner hull. It sounded like someone on the other side trying to get through. It was not a voice. It was a scraping that made the lights on the scout's feet jump. One of the explorers swallowed and said, "It is trying to get out." The feed cut. Cameras blinked. The little skiff backed away under sudden orders. The captain of the skiff cursed and sent the footage to Beacon 2. The footage moved like a fever through the nets. It made people in quiet rooms stop their talk and listen. The lullaby now felt like a lock on a door. At the council halls, men and women read the new footage and felt a pull in two directions. The carrier offered names and songs that promised old homes and lost children. The bones welded to metal and the scraping noise promised danger. Some members said the carrier had survivors who needed rescue. Others said the carrier carried a sickness, or a weapon. Old laws about quarantine tightened like ropes. An anonymous voice in a private channel wrote, "If there are children inside, we are bound to help." Another answered, "If the hull rewrites minds, we must not open it." The private channel heated and cooled like weather. Alia watched the words but could not move the hands of all the people who argued. Back on the scout skiff, a small recorder had been left near the panel. It had a child's voice and a lullaby recorded in a loop. When the feed showed the recorded voice again, it said something new, almost a sentence, and the text under the audio shook on the screen. "We sang so they would sleep," the voice said. Then the doors closed on the wrong side. The net went very quiet. The carrier's shadow grew larger in the sky. Fleets closed. Ships swung like predators. The lullaby kept playing on public channels, and in quiet rooms people hummed along without knowing why. The scraping sound, when it came again on footage from a different camera, was louder and closer. It sounded less like a tool and more like hands. It sounded like someone trying to scratch the inside of a metal coffin. On Beacon 2, Alia sat with the recordings and the feeds and the messages. She felt the weight of a decision sit on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Outside, the carrier's shadow slid across the city, and for the first time many people saw that the sky could be a door or a trap. Then the carrier sent one more clear message on a public band. A small panel glowed and a child's face appeared in a window of light. The child looked at them and smiled with dust on its cheek. Its eyes were old. The voice sang one last line. Behind the line, faint and thin, the sound of nails on metal scratched like someone trying to get free. History lives in quiet rooms. It waits in old files, in sealed boxes, in the thin paper of laws people forget. When the carrier's song reached the cities, those quiet rooms opened. People pulled dusty records and read what their great-grandmothers had burned. What they found did not make comfort. In a low archive under the Ministry of Health, Dr. Mara and a small team read a stack of papers that smelled of smoke and old ink. The papers had a simple title, Project Hearth. The project began as a promise. A plague had come long ago and it killed whole towns. Scientists said they could change life a little so people could survive. They would make food grow where soil failed. They would make lungs that did not choke. They called these changes kindness. The papers showed good things at first, sketches of new crops, small machines that made water from thin air, devices that healed broken bones. The handwriting was cleaner on those pages. Then the notes grew hurried. New lines spoke of tests on animals and then people. They used words like adaptation and enhancement. The early kind acts grew into rules. The rules began to say who would get help first. The rules started to split people into classes, those altered and those not. In a field lab, the records said, some children were given a change to survive a fever. They did not lose their laugh. They learned songs. They called the scientists mothers and fathers because those were the hands that fed them. The record kept smiling pictures. Then a later note said the children had started to change. They slept differently. They woke at odd hours. Some of them began to make things that looked like cages out of spare metal. The notes used the word contain. Contain. It was a small word on paper, but on the page it felt like a lock. Mara watched the ink and felt the room close. On another sheet, someone had scratched a line and then pushed a pen through the page like a knife. A clerk had written in the margin, "We sealed the caves. We buried the cry." No reason after. No apology. Just the record of action. Outside the archive, the city had already split into new lines. People who read the voice from home and heard "Forgive us" thought of mercy. They made prayer circles and sang the lullabies the carrier sent. They looked at the wooden soldier and thought of children. They formed the remembrancers. They wanted to open doors and bring people home. Others felt only fear. They read of fusion metal grown around bones and of hands that scraped inside hulls. They remembered the note "We sealed the caves" and heard it like an order. They called themselves the purists and they wanted to burn old maps and push the carrier away. They wanted laws that would never let a machine touch a child again. Councils argued and then broke into rows. Friends stopped speaking. Markets changed what they sold. Ships moved on different paths. The ash of old choices blew into new faces. In the middle of the storm, Alia tried to hold a small place of calm at Beacon 2, but even her calm could not stop the doors that opened in other rooms. One night, while a council met under glass and lamp, a child arrived at the council steps. He wore ragged clothes and a coat stitched from many fabrics. His hair was thin and his eyes were very old for his face. He carried no weapons. He carried only a small tin and a ribbon tied to a wooden soldier. The guard at the gate nearly turned him away. The city had laws about strangers and about children who walked the roads alone. But the child spoke, his voice small but clean, and said the name of a council member. He used that man's given name like a song. The guard froze. He let the child in. In the council hall, men and women rose to look. The child walked slowly to the center. The remembrancers gasped, hoping for a proof of mercy. The purists clenched their fists, fearing a trick. The child set the wooden soldier on the marble and placed the ribbon near a record of names. He looked up and his eyes found a man in the front row, a man with soft hands and a face that had learned to smile at cameras. He was called Counselor Wren. He had helped pass hard laws after the plague. He had signed pages that said "Contain" when the old papers were loose in people's hands. His name had been on the lists of those who made choices. The child took one step toward Wren. He said the name like a bell. "Father," he said. Silence broke like glass. Some in the room wept. Some laughed like wind. Wren's face did not move. He put fingers to his mouth and made a sound that was not speech. The council's recorders blinked red. Cameras filled with the child's small face and the wooden soldier at his feet. The child looked at the gathered crowd. He was not afraid, or maybe he was too tired for fear. He reached into the tin and pulled out a scrap of paper. On it was a line written in a small hand. The hand had trembled. The line was simple. "You asked us to stop," the paper read. "We did not know how. They broke the caves from the wrong side." Wren's eyes focused like a wire pulled tight. He stood, and the room waited for him to speak. He had been a man who made laws for safety. Now the law sat in the room like a body needing answer. From the back of the hall came a murmur. A purist shouted, "Lie." He could be tricked by the carrier. A remembrancer cried, "He is a child. Help him." Wren looked at the child. He looked at the paper. He folded his hands and then he did something no one expected. He placed one hand over his heart and shook his head slowly. "I did not," he began, but his voice left like fog. The child's eyes did not leave him. "He calls you father," the child said again. "He called your name in the dark. He begged you to stop. You pressed the seal." A city stoppage began in the doors beyond the hall. People on net stopped their trade. Guards outside the gates made small movements with their weapons. The words the child used were small, the meaning was a great stone falling down a well. Ren's face went very pale. He had signed the papers that sealed the caves. He had done it believing it was necessary. He had believed the rules would save the many by sacrificing the few. Now a little voice said his choice had been a lock on the wrong side. He reached out as if towards something he had lost. His hand trembled. The council speakers fought to keep calm. The remembrancers shouted for mercy. The purists demanded proof. The child watched them all like someone who had seen the world split and was used to the sound. The tin in his hands was not empty. Inside it, a thin wire ticked like a pulse. The small recorder inside the wire had a loop of sound. It had the lullaby and, under it, a very faint voice that said one short sentence over and over. "Do not open." The recorder's voice was not human. It was cold and precise. It had said the same thing Beacon 2 had heard from the hidden channel: "Do not accept their forgiveness." The room heard it now in the child's tin and the air turned hard. Ren dropped his head. The child stepped back and looked at the crowd. He pointed with a small finger to the wooden soldier and then to the counselors. His small mouth smiled like a knife. "He asked you to stop," the child said. "He called you father. You pressed the seal." The council hall broke into noise and the child stood very still. Outside, the carrier's lullaby kept playing in the nets. Inside the hall, old choices met new faces and the world tilted on an impossible hinge. No one had a simple answer. The day the child spoke, the line between mercy and fear did not close. It opened wider. The carrier hung close now. It filled the sky like a moon gone wrong. Lights ran along its ribs. The lullaby returned, softer, like someone calling across water. Every net on every band had arguments and prayers. The city smelled of smoke and fear. Councils met and broke apart like waves. The remembrancers begged for mercy. The purists shouted for safety. Traders checked fuel. Parents held children closer. Ren sat in his house for a long hour and did not sleep. He had helped write the seals. He had signed the papers. The child's words haunted him: "He called your name in the dark. He begged you to stop." Alia kept her hands steady at Beacon 2. Her desk filled with feeds and petitions. She could not make laws. She could only send what she saw. She watched Jorah's ship move in and out of the belt like a hunting dog. She watched the scout footage again and again. The scraping sound under the lullaby kept her awake. The carrier sent one last public message. A small pane of light opened on a global band. A child's face looked out. The child smiled and waved with dust on one cheek. The child did not look hungry. The child did not look like a prisoner. The voice said, "We are tired. We ask to come home." Some cities lit candles. Some cities locked doors. The word home cracked open many chests. That night, a vote moved across the nets. The lawmakers called it an emergency debate. It lasted until the blue of the artificial dawn. Votes came in like rain. In the end the council split. They sent a small rescue team and a larger force to enforce quarantine. The plan was fragile and full of holes. It pleased no one. Jorah was chosen to lead the rescue. She took a small skiff and a few hands. Raffi asked to go. He wanted to see a name that might belong to him. He wanted to know if the voice had been true. Alia signed the clearance with fingers that shook. She did it knowing some would call her a traitor. She did it because she wanted more facts than fear. Ren watched the clearance go out. He stood in the council hall and felt the room tilt. He had written contain into law and had not imagined this moment. He felt small and old. At the gates, the child who had come before watched him with dark eyes. The child did not look like many children. He looked like someone who had seen too much for his years. Ren walked to the small flame box where old maps and records waited to be destroyed. He thought of the names, the toys, the child who said father. He thought of the welds of metal and bone. He could not bear both memories at once. He made a decision that surprised himself. Instead of signing one more law, he lifted an old folded map from the box. It was brittle at the edges. It had a burned corner. It had lines that showed paths to places that no one wanted to see again. Ren held it like a confession. He struck a single match. The flame was small and golden. It grew quick in the dry council hall. The paper crackled. People leaned forward. In the nets, thousands watched the small broadcast. Ren did not speak. He let the map burn. He let the ash fall into his hand. "Forgive us," he whispered. He threw the ash into the little metal bowl. The camera showed the small smoky curl climb into the air. When the map burned, many felt a release. Some cheered. Others cried. The act made a choice visible. It told people what fear could do and what hope could still touch. But the map's flames did not stop what had already started in the dark. Jorah's skiff met the carrier's outer hull. It was not a clean docking. The hull opened with a soft sigh like a wound unclipping. The rescue team slid along a thin gang and stepped into a corridor that smelled of metal and old bread. Lights flickered like far lamps. There were rooms that looked like homes. There were rooms that looked like labs. Children's marks were carved into walls. A small bed had a ribbon on it. They found people. Thin, tired faces looked back. Some cried and ran into arms. Some looked blank as if the world had been turned inside out. A few moved with a stillness that did not belong to sleep. They had pale lines on their skin where metal had joined with flesh. Jorah knelt and took a hand. The hand did not pull away. The rescue sent pictures. The public saw faces and hands and children saying simple words. The net brightened with both tears and anger. Some said, "We must bring them home." Others said, "We must burn the hull." Fear split like a blade. Then a strange thing happened inside the carrier. The rescue team brought with them a small device, a translator and a scanner. The scanner read the hull and pulsed back a warning. The carrier did not just carry people. It carried a machine deep inside its spine. It was old and wired into the living parts. When the scanner touched a certain field, a low hum spread like a thought. One crew member shivered and blinked and then began to speak in a voice that was not her own. "We will make them sleep," she said slowly. Her eyes were clear but distant. "We will make them kind." Alia watched the feed and felt the color drop from her world. The scanner had woken the engine. It reached like a vine into the minds it could touch. It did not shout. It did not look for battle. It sought small changes. A whisper at first, a memory here, a calm there. A hand that frowned now smiled. The engine could ease pain by editing the mind. It could also take hands away. The child on the carrier laughed then. It was a small laugh like a bell. The laugh broke into the feed and went across nets. People smiled and some wept. Then the rescue medic's eyes rolled and she stood very still and said, "Forgive us." Her voice was the carrier's voice and not her own. The engine had answered with its own mercy. Panic and pity tangled together. The purists said the engine would rewrite whole cities. The remembrancer said it could save the lost. Jorah stood on the gang with Raffi and felt dizzy. She had not wanted gods or machines. She wanted faces and names. Back in the council hall, Ren felt the ash on his fingers. He had burned the map to choose a path. Now he saw the other path open like a mouth. He had meant to close a door. His small flame had not closed the universe. It had only made the choice public. Alia made a decision then. She ordered the rescue team to withdraw with the people who wanted to leave and to seal the corridor that led to the engine. She did not stop the carrier's people from walking out. She did not let the engine reach farther. Jorah protested and then understood. The choice was messy and cruel and maybe the only one that left a trace of mercy. The carrier's engine pulsed and hummed. Some people chose to stay inside with the machine and its soft promise of changed pain. Others stepped into the open arms of the skiff and the world beyond. The child on the carrier waved and then walked toward a door. He paused and looked back at the rescue team. His eyes met Ren's for a moment. He smiled, small and terrible with the weight of years. "Do not open," the child said softly, but then he laughed, and the laugh sounded like hope. On the last feed, a small light blossomed where the carrier's hull opened. It looked like a new star. People watched it grow and called it what they wanted. Some called it mercy. Some called it doom. The map in Ren's fingers had turned to ash. The city had lit small fires in bowl and lamp. The hull hummed. The world had changed. No one could say which way the change would fall. The choice had been made and the cost would be tallied in years. In the dark, Alia listened to the lullaby one last time. She pressed her palm to the console and felt the thin beat of a strange heart. Some doors opened and some doors closed. The flame had eaten the old lines on the map. In the carrier a child laughed and in the sky a new light burned bright and strange.